Every night, after the last meeting ended and the office lights slowly turned off, one man was still working. Marcus pushed his cleaning cart quietly across the marble floor. The building was one of the biggest corporate towers in the city. During the day, it was full of important people, executives in expensive suits, assistants rushing with files, and managers talking about money and deals worth millions. But at night, none of them noticed Marcus. To most people, he was just a janitor. He moved silently, cleaning desks, emptying trash bins, wiping fingerprints from glass walls. People walked past him every day without looking at his face. Some did not even say hello. Marcus was used to it. He had learned long ago that some people only see titles, not people. Still, Marcus noticed everything. He noticed who stayed late, who looked stressed, who skipped meals, who looked tired but smiled anyway. And lately, he noticed something strange about the man everyone feared and respected. The CEO, Richard Hale. Richard Hale was known as a strongman, a self-made millionaire, a man who never slowed down. Employees said he worked harder than anyone else in the building. He arrived early and left late. Meetings followed him everywhere. But over the past few weeks, Marcus saw small changes. At first, it was nothing big. The CEO would stop for a moment near the elevator, pressing his hand lightly against his chest. Sometimes he rubbed his neck like something hurt. Other times, he stood still, breathing slower than normal before walking again. Nobody else seemed to notice. Or maybe they noticed and ignored it. One night, Marcus was cleaning outside the executive conference room when the door opened suddenly. Richard Hale walked out, talking on his phone. His voice sounded strong, but his face looked pale. For a second, he lost his balance and grabbed the wall. Marcus froze. The CEO quickly straightened himself and continued walking, as if nothing happened. Two executives followed behind him, laughing about profits and contracts. None of them asked if he was okay. Marcus watched silently. Something about that moment stayed in his mind. He had seen that look before. Years ago, Marcus worked as a cleaner in a hospital. He was not a doctor, but he had spent years watching patients come and go. He learned to notice small signs, tired eyes, slow breathing, the way someone held their chest without thinking. Signs people ignored until it was too late. The next morning, Marcus saw the CEO again. Richard walked fast through the lobby, but there was sweat on his forehead, even though the air was cool. His assistant handed him coffee, and his hand shook slightly as he took it. People around him kept talking about business. No one asked if he felt sick. Marcus felt uneasy. Maybe it was stress. Maybe he was wrong. After all, he was just a janitor. What did he know about a millionaire's health? But the feeling did not go away. Days passed, and the signs became clearer. The CEO looked more tired. He snapped at employees more often. He started leaving meetings early. Once, Marcus saw him sit alone in his office, eyes closed, breathing deeply like he was trying to control pain. Marcus stopped cleaning for a moment and watched through the glass wall. Something was wrong, and nobody was seeing it. Not the assistants, not the executives, not even the CEO himself. That night, as Marcus pushed his cart down the empty hallway, he kept thinking about what he had seen. He knew it was not his place to interfere. People like him were not expected to speak to people like Richard Hale. But what if staying silent was a mistake? Marcus looked back toward the dark executive floor. He whispered quietly to himself, "Something is wrong, and nobody is noticing." The hallway lights flickered off one by one as he walked away. And somewhere above him, in the quiet office at the top of the building, a man's life was slowly moving toward danger, while the only person who saw the warning signs was the man nobody noticed. Marcus did not sleep well that night. The image of Richard Hale holding his chest stayed in his mind. He had seen that same movement before, many years ago, in a very different place. Before working in the corporate tower, Marcus worked as a cleaner in a public hospital. It was not an easy job. The hours were long, and the pay was small. But the hospital taught him something important: how to watch people closely. He saw patients arrive, smiling, and leave in silence. He saw doctors rush through hallways when seconds mattered. Over time, Marcus learned that the body often gives warnings before something serious happens. Small things, short breaths, sudden sweating, quiet pain people try to hide. He remembered one man clearly. The man had complained only about being tired. Nurses thought it was stress. Hours later, the man collapsed from a heart problem. Marcus never forgot how fast everything changed. That memory now made him uneasy. Back at the office building, life continued as normal. Employees rushed between meetings. Phones rang constantly. The company was preparing for a major business deal, and everyone seemed focused only on numbers and deadlines. Everyone except Marcus. He started noticing more details about the CEO. Richard Hale drank more coffee than before. He rubbed his neck often. Sometimes he stood still after walking a short distance, as if catching his breath. One afternoon, Marcus saw him exit the elevator. The CEO smiled at people around him, but when he thought no one was looking, his expression changed. His face tightened in pain for just a second. Marcus felt a heavy feeling in his chest. This was not normal tiredness. Later that day, Marcus gathered the courage to speak to one of the assistants outside the executive offices. "Is Mr. Hale okay?" he asked carefully. The assistant looked surprised. "The CEO? Of course he is. He's just busy." Marcus nodded, but the answer did not convince him. The next few days made things worse. The CEO became more impatient. Meetings ended early. Once, Marcus saw him drop a pen because his hand suddenly lost strength. Richard quickly laughed it off, but Marcus noticed the frustration in his eyes. Still, nobody said anything. In this building, weakness was not something people talked about. Marcus began to doubt himself. Maybe he was imagining things. Maybe his hospital memories were making him worry too much. After all, he was not trained. He had no medical degree, just experience. One evening, while cleaning the executive floor, Marcus saw the CEO alone in his office again. The glass walls made everything visible. Richard sat in his chair, leaning forward, both hands pressed against his chest. His breathing looked heavy. For a moment, Marcus almost knocked on the door. But he stopped. What would he even say? "I think you are sick." Why would a millionaire CEO listen to a janitor? Marcus turned away, feeling frustrated. Sometimes knowing something felt like a burden when no one wanted to listen. That night, as he emptied trash bins, two executives walked past him, talking quietly. "Hale looks exhausted," one of them said. "He always does," the other replied. "That's why he's successful." They laughed and walked away. Marcus stood still. Success, he thought, should not look like pain. The feeling in his stomach grew stronger. The signs were becoming clearer now. The same pattern he had seen years ago was happening again. Someone pushing their body too far, while everyone around them ignored the warning signs. And Marcus knew how these stories sometimes ended. Badly. As he finished cleaning and turned off the lights, he looked once more toward the CEO's office at the end of the hallway. The door was closed, but the light inside was still on. Marcus whispered to himself, almost like a warning. He doesn't know yet, but something is coming. And deep inside, Marcus felt the same fear he once felt in the hospital halls. The fear that time was running out and nobody important was paying attention. The next morning, the building felt different. There was more noise than usual. Employees moved faster. Assistants whispered in hallways. Everyone was talking about the same thing, the company's biggest deal of the year. If it succeeded, the company would grow even bigger. If it failed, millions of dollars could be lost. At the center of it all was Richard Hale, and Marcus could see the pressure on him. From across the lobby, Marcus watched the CEO walk inside. Richard's steps were quick, but not steady. His face looked tired, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He smiled at people as they greeted him, but the smile disappeared the moment he turned away. Marcus noticed something else now. Richard was breathing through his mouth. That small detail made Marcus uneasy. He had seen it before in patients trying to hide discomfort. All day, Marcus tried to focus on his work, but his eyes kept moving toward the executive floor. Every time the elevator opened, he looked up, expecting something to go wrong. By afternoon, Marcus made a decision. He could not just watch anymore. When the executive assistant stepped away from her desk, Marcus walked forward slowly. His heart was beating fast. He was not used to speaking in places like this. "I need to talk to Mr. Hale," Marcus said quietly. The assistant looked confused. Do you have a meeting scheduled? No, Marcus admitted. But it's important. She shook her head politely. The CEO is in meetings all day. Marcus hesitated. He knew how this looked. A janitor asking to see the CEO sounded ridiculous. Still, the feeling inside him would not go away. It's about his health, Marcus said carefully. The assistant's expression changed, but not in the way Marcus hoped. She smiled politely again, the kind of smile people use when they want a conversation to end. Thank you, she said, but Mr. Hale is fine. Marcus stepped back. The conversation was over before it even started. As he walked away, he felt small. Maybe he had crossed a line. Maybe this really was none of his business. But later that evening, Marcus saw something that erased all his doubts. The boardroom doors opened after a long meeting. Executives walked out, talking loudly about numbers and contracts. Richard followed behind them, but he moved slower. His hand pressed against the table as he stood up. For a second, his face twisted in pain. No one noticed. Marcus felt a cold wave of fear. The signs were no longer small. They were clear now. The CEO walked past him, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. Richard looked tired, more tired than Marcus had ever seen anyone look. Marcus almost spoke. The words reached his throat. You need to see a doctor. But they never came out. Richard's phone rang, and he walked away quickly, already back in business mode. Marcus stood there, frustrated with himself. Time was slipping away. That night, the building grew quiet again. Marcus cleaned the empty hallways, but his mind was not on his work. He kept thinking about the hospital, about the patients who ignored pain until their bodies forced them to stop. He remembered how quickly things could change. One moment normal, the next moment chaos. Near midnight, Marcus passed by the CEO's office. The lights were still on. Through the glass wall, he saw Richard standing near the window, one hand on his chest, breathing slowly as if trying to control something inside him. Marcus felt certain now. This was not stress. This was danger. He turned away, his hands tight around the cleaning cart handle. He knew he had tried to warn them. Nobody wanted to listen. And yet, the fear inside him kept growing. As the elevator doors closed and Marcus headed down to the empty lobby, he whispered quietly, "He doesn't have much time." Above him, on the top floor, the CEO returned to his desk, ignoring the pain again, unaware that his body was getting closer to its breaking point, while the only man who understood the warning signs was the one nobody wanted to hear. The morning of the big meeting arrived with energy and pressure filling the entire building. Executives walked quickly through the halls. Assistants carried documents and tablets. Everyone knew this meeting could change the future of the company. Millions of dollars depended on it. And at the center of everything was Richard Hale. Marcus noticed him the moment he entered the building. The CEO looked worse than before. His face was pale, and his movements were slower, even though he tried to hide it. He smiled at people, shook hands, and spoke with confidence. But Marcus saw the small details others missed, the tight jaw, the heavy breathing, the way Richard paused for a second before stepping into the elevator. Marcus felt a deep sense of worry. Something felt wrong today. All morning, Marcus worked on the lower floors, but his attention stayed on the executive level. Every time an elevator opened, his eyes lifted automatically. He could not explain it, but he felt like he was waiting for something bad to happen. Around noon, the board meeting began. Inside the large conference room, company leaders sat around a long glass table. Screens showed numbers, charts, and projections. Richard stood at the front, leading the discussion. His voice sounded strong, but inside his body was struggling. Outside, Marcus cleaned the hallway quietly. Then it happened. A loud noise echoed through the hall, a chair falling. The conference room door opened suddenly. Voices rose in panic. Marcus looked up immediately. Inside the room, Richard Hale was on the floor. For a moment, no one moved. Executives stood frozen, shocked. Some shouted his name. Others pulled out their phones, unsure what to do. Marcus dropped his cleaning cloth and ran forward. Years of watching hospital emergencies came back to him instantly. He pushed through the crowd and knelt beside the CEO. Richard's face was pale, his breathing uneven. "Call emergency services," Marcus said firmly. His voice was calm, clear, different from the quiet janitor everyone knew. Someone finally reacted and made the call. Marcus gently adjusted Richard's position, making sure his airway was clear. He spoke to him calmly, trying to keep him conscious. "Stay with me. Help is coming." The room was filled with fear now. Expensive suits, powerful people. None of them knew what to do. They watched as the janitor took control of the situation. Minutes felt like hours. Richard tried to speak, but couldn't. His hand gripped Marcus's sleeve weakly. Marcus kept talking to him, keeping him awake, remembering everything he had seen doctors do in moments like this. "Just breathe," Marcus said softly. Slow breaths. The sound of sirens finally reached the building. Paramedics rushed in, taking over quickly. They asked questions, attaching monitors, preparing to move him. One of the paramedics looked at Marcus. "You kept him stable," he said. That helped. Marcus stepped back quietly as they lifted Richard onto the stretcher. The powerful CEO who controlled millions was now silent, being rushed out of the room while employees watched in shock. The hallway became quiet again after the ambulance doors closed. Only then did Marcus feel his hands shaking. He leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. The fear he had carried for weeks had finally become real. Later that evening, news spread through the building. Doctors said the situation was serious. Richard had suffered a major heart event. If help had come, even a few minutes later, the outcome could have been very different. Employees began whispering about what happened, about how no executive reacted first, about how the janitor did. Marcus returned to his work that night, as usual. He cleaned the same floors, pushed the same cart, and avoided attention. But the building felt different now. People looked at him longer than before. Some even said thank you. As Marcus turned off the lights on the executive floor, he looked once toward the empty conference room where everything had changed. He knew one thing for certain. The warning signs had been there all along. Everyone saw them, but only one person understood what they meant. And now, for the first time, the man nobody noticed had become the reason the most powerful man in the building was still alive. The building felt quieter in the days after the collapse. The executive floor, once full of loud meetings and fast footsteps, now moved slowly. People spoke in softer voices. The chair at the head of the conference table remained empty, and everyone felt the difference. Richard Hale was still in the hospital. Rumors spread quickly through the company. Some said it was stress. Others said exhaustion. A few whispered that the CEO had ignored warning signs for too long. But one thing everyone agreed on was this. If help had come later, he might not have survived. And slowly, people began talking about Marcus, the janitor who stepped forward when nobody else did. Marcus did not like the attention. He continued his work the same way as before, cleaning floors and emptying trash bins. He avoided long conversations and kept his head down. To him, nothing had changed. He believed he only did what anyone should have done. But inside the hospital, something important was happening. Richard Hale finally woke up fully after surgery. The room was quiet except for the sound of machines. For the first time in years, he was forced to stop moving, stop working, and simply lie still. Doctors explained everything carefully. His heart condition had been developing for weeks. The symptoms were clear: chest discomfort, fatigue, shortness of breath. Stress had made it worse. If the collapse had happened somewhere else, or if help had been delayed, the result could have been fatal. Richard listened silently. One question stayed his mind. "Who helped me?" he asked. The doctor smiled slightly. "Your employee, the janitor." He reacted very quickly. Richard frowned, confused. A janitor? He tried to remember the moment, but everything felt blurred. He only remembered falling, and someone's voice telling him to breathe. Back at the office, Marcus was finishing his night shift when security approached him. "The CEO wants to meet you when he returns," the guard said. Marcus froze for a moment. He felt uncomfortable immediately. He did not want recognition or rewards. He only wanted things to go back to normal. But things were already changing. Employees who once ignored him now nodded when they passed by. Some even stopped to thank him. The same people who never noticed him before were now curious about him. Marcus did not know how to feel about it. A few days later, Richard Hale returned to the building for the first time. He walked slower now. The confidence was still there, but something else had changed too. He looked more aware, more observant. The office gathered quietly as he entered. Instead of going straight to his office, Richard stopped near the cleaning cart where Marcus stood. For a moment, neither man spoke. Marcus felt nervous. He was not used to standing face to face with someone so powerful. Richard broke the silence. "You saved my life," he said simply. Marcus shook his head. "I just helped until the ambulance came." But Richard did not look away. "They told me you noticed something was wrong before anyone else," he said. "Why?" Marcus hesitated. He was not good with speeches. "I used to work in a hospital," he said quietly. "I saw the signs before." Richard stood silent for a moment, thinking. All the meetings, the deals, the pressure, none of it mattered in that moment. A man he had never truly noticed had seen his pain when everyone else ignored it. For the first time in many years, Richard felt something unfamiliar. Humility. "I don't even think I knew your name before this," he admitted. Marcus gave a small smile. "That's okay, sir." But to Richard, it was not okay anymore. As Marcus returned to his work, Richard watched him walk away. The realization hit him hard. Success had made him blind to the people around him. He had built a powerful company, but he had stopped seeing individuals. And the person who saved him was the one standing quietly in the background all along. That evening, as the building lights dimmed again, conversations changed. Employees spoke less about profits and more about what had happened, about how easily things could have ended differently. And somewhere in the quiet hallway, Marcus pushed his cleaning cart forward, unaware that his simple action had already begun changing the way the entire company saw value, respect, and the people they once ignored. The company felt different after Richard Hale returned. Not because of new rules or new meetings, but because people started paying attention in a way they never had before. For years, the building moved fast. Everyone focused on results, deadlines, and promotions. People noticed power and titles. They noticed success. But now something had shifted. People noticed Marcus. At first, it was small changes. Employees greeted him in the morning. Some asked how he was doing. Others thanked him quietly when they passed by. The same hallways where he once felt invisible now felt unfamiliar. Marcus did not know how to react to it. He still wore the same uniform. He still did the same work. In his mind, nothing about him had changed. But in the minds of others, everything had. Richard Hale also changed. The CEO no longer rushed through the building without looking around. He walked slower now, not only because of recovery, but because he had started noticing people. Security guards, receptionists, cleaning staff, people he once passed without seeing. One afternoon, Richard stopped near the lobby and watched Marcus working. The janitor moved with the same quiet focus as always, carefully cleaning a spill before anyone could slip. Richard realized something important. Marcus had always cared about people's safety, even when no one cared about him. Later that week, Richard called for a company meeting. Employees gathered in the large conference hall, unsure what to expect. Some thought it was about business recovery after his health scare. Instead, Richard spoke about something else. He talked about pressure, about ignoring warning signs, about how easy it was to believe that being busy meant being strong. The room stayed silent, as he admitted something many never expected to hear from him. "I almost lost my life," he said calmly, not because nobody saw the problem, but because nobody stopped to look closely enough. His eyes moved across the room until they rested on Marcus, standing quietly near the back. "And the person who helped me the most," Richard continued, "was someone many of us walked past every day." The room turned toward Marcus. Marcus felt uncomfortable with so many eyes on him. He lowered his head slightly, wishing the moment would pass. Richard thanked him publicly, not with dramatic words, but with honest ones. He explained how Marcus stayed calm, how he acted quickly, and how those few minutes made the difference between life and death. For the first time, employees saw Marcus not as a janitor, but as a person with experience, awareness, and courage. After the meeting, people approached Marcus one by one. Some shook his hand. Others simply said thank you. Marcus responded politely, but inside he felt strange. Attention was never something he wanted. That evening, as Marcus cleaned the executive floor again, Richard approached him. "I've been thinking," the CEO said. Marcus stopped working, listening carefully. This company talks a lot about leadership, Richard continued. But leadership is not always about position. Sometimes it's about responsibility. Marcus did not fully understand where the conversation was going. Richard explained that after the incident, he reviewed company safety procedures. Emergency response training was weak. Employees did not know how to react under pressure. The company needed someone observant, someone who understood how small signs could become big problems. Someone like Marcus. Marcus looked surprised. He had never imagined being part of decisions like this. "I'm not an expert," Marcus said honestly. Richard nodded. He noticed what experts missed. The word stayed in Marcus's mind long after the conversation ended. That night, as he pushed his cleaning cart through the quiet hallway, Marcus realized something had changed, not only for him, but for everyone in the building. Respect was no longer connected only to job titles. It was connected to actions. And slowly, the company was learning a lesson it had ignored for years. The value of a person was not decided by their position, but by the care they showed when it mattered most. Marcus turned off the lights at the end of the hallway, unaware that the next decision Richard Hale would make would change his life in a way he never expected. Weeks passed, and life inside the company slowly returned to normal. Meetings continued. Deadlines returned. Phones rang again in busy offices. From the outside, everything looked the same as before. But the people inside the building knew something had changed. Richard Hale changed the most. Before his collapse, his days were filled only with numbers and decisions. Now, he paid attention to people. He listened more. He walked through the building without rushing, noticing things he had ignored for years. And every time he saw Marcus quietly doing his work, he remembered how close he had come to losing everything. One evening, Richard called Marcus to his office. Marcus felt nervous walking into the large room. He had cleaned his office hundreds of times, but this was the first time he entered as a guest. The city lights shined through the glass walls, and the room felt unusually calm. Richard did not speak immediately. He looked thoughtful, as if choosing his words carefully. "I've been thinking about what happened," he finally said. "Not just about my health, but about this company." Marcus stood quietly, unsure what to say. Richard continued, "We built systems to protect money, deals, and data. But we never built systems to protect people. And that almost cost me my life." He explained that after reviewing everything, he wanted to create a new role in the company. Someone responsible for safety awareness and emergency readiness. Someone who could help train employees to notice problems early and react calmly when something went wrong. Then Richard looked directly at Marcus. "I want you to take that role." Marcus blinked in surprise. For a moment, he thought he misunderstood. "Me?" he asked softly. Richard nodded. "You saw what everyone else missed. That matters more than a title." Marcus hesitated. His life had always been simple. He worked quietly, avoided attention, and went home at the end of the day. The idea of stepping into something new felt frightening. "I don't have business experience," Marcus said honestly. Richard smiled slightly. "You have human experience. That's harder to teach." The room fell silent for a moment. Marcus thought about his years in the hospital, about being ignored, about watching people suffer because small signs were missed. Maybe this was not about promotion or status. Maybe it was about making sure what happened to Richard never happened again. Slowly, Marcus nodded. "I'll try," he said. News spread quickly through the building. Employees were surprised at first, but most understood why the decision made sense. Marcus had already proven himself when it mattered most. Still, Marcus kept one thing the same. He did not throw away his janitor uniform. Instead, he folded it carefully and kept it at home. It reminded him of where he started and of the nights when nobody noticed him, because those nights had taught him how to see others. Months later, the company felt warmer. Employees received safety training. Emergency drills became normal. People checked on each other more often. Small problems were no longer ignored. And Marcus walked through the same hallways, no longer invisible. One evening, as he stood in the lobby watching employees leave for the day, Richard walked past him and stopped. "You know," the CEO said quietly, "I used to think success meant being the strongest person in the room." Marcus smiled slightly. "Sometimes it just means listening." Richard nodded, understanding the lesson fully now. As the lights dimmed and the building grew quiet again, Marcus looked around the place where he once felt unseen. Nothing about the walls had changed, but the people had, and the truth remained simple. The person everyone ignored had been the one paying attention all along. Because sometimes the hero is not the loudest person in the room. Sometimes it is the one who quietly cares enough to notice when something is wrong.